Gold and silver is actually technically better than holding bonds because they typically, especially gold, go up with inflation over time. So the depository is the big enchilada. That's the elephant in lots of states.
Today, we're joined by Pat Holland from the Missouri Freedom Initiative. He's helping to back and further legal tender legislation in the state of Missouri, which would allow Missouri residents to use gold and silver as legal tender, just like our founding fathers outlined in the United States Constitution. Pat, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Hey, Ron, thank you so much for having me back. Red shirt, solidarity, 5 o'clock shadows, and
gold and silver.
That's right, gold and silver. Yeah, it's the Ron's Basement fan club over here. So it's very, very nice to be with you again. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of all the basement dwellers, it's always an honor to have you here. And why is it so important to people joining us right now, that person joining us right now, that they live in a state that has gold and silver legal tender legislation?
You bet. There's several. Okay. By the way, the Constitution allows for us to do this right now. I get hit with that all the time. Hey, we don't need a bill. We can do that right now. Yes, we can. You and I, Ron, can exchange gold and silver all day long, basically between us. But businesses are less likely to take it if two circumstances aren't actually approached properly. Number one, legal tender status in the state. Gold and silver is not legal tender in most states. There are, I believe, 5 states right now that actually have it, and I'll even name them. We'll start with Utah because they got it done first. We have Oklahoma, Arizona, Texas. Is it Texas? No. Arkansas, and one more state that I'm missing right now.
Kansas?
Nope, I don't think they have legal tender. Arkansas was the only one that got it done in 2023. But there are 5 states technically. Arizona is typically missed. They do have it though. They have it written differently. So legal tender status. In other words, the state recognizes that gold and silver are quote unquote transactable money. Okay, that's what you get with legal status, legal tender status. Part 2, and also important, if the state is accepting gold and silver for payment of taxes. Now, this does not mean that you and I will do this, Ron, but they will accept gold and silver along with $1, along with whatever else for payment of taxes. Businesses will be much more likely to transact in gold and silver if they can pay taxes in it, if they need to, if they want to. And so those are the 2 things that are really necessary. But the really big enchilada, the elephant in the room, Ron, that everyone wants, every state wants, is a depository. Now, the depository is critical for so many different reasons. Number one, every state has a pension fund, and that is usually handled by the treasurer of the state. Well, if we're hyperinflating and they're holding on to bonds as their reserves in these pension funds, they are losing out to inflation, as they have been for the last 3 years. Where the bonds are paying, typically 2.4% that most states are holding, inflation's been over 10%. This does not bode well for pension funds. So yes, the pensioners will get the same amount of money they were promised, but it's worth less. So, and then also they'll pay out more, basically under those circumstances as well. If you have a depository in your state that is linked to your state government, you're basically starting to compete with the Federal Reserve by having reserves in your state that go above and beyond, basically any assets that are directly linked to the value of the dollar. No, gold and silver technically are linked to the value of the dollar. We value them in dollars always. But the fact is they typically go up, over time, where the value of the dollar typically goes down. So this is hedging. If you have a 401k, Ron, your guy who is running your 401k for you is probably going to recommend some gold or silver stocks to go into that 401k. Or equally, if you have an IRA, they'll probably recommend some physical, and which you can do with an IRA. This is hedging your investment. People typically do that with bonds because they're safe. They always produce an interest rate. always. Gold and silver is actually technically better than holding bonds because they typically, especially gold, go up with inflation over time. So the depository is the big enchilada. That's the elephant in lots of states. By the way, I want to give a shout out to our friends with Citizens for Sound Money. Right now, I know of 3 states that they're working with to get depositories in: Florida, New Hampshire, Texas, and I'm not sure of any others, but right now they're working with those states to try and get depositories for silver and gold.
If you're looking to buy gold, silver, or platinum, do yourself a favor and check out Pimbex, the online precious metals bullion dealer and sponsor of Ron's Basement. I was a happy customer before they offered to support the channel. You'll find they have the best prices, quality, and service. I think Pimbex is best, and you will too. And be sure to tell them that you're from Ron's Basement.
We in Missouri, and you and I are both in Missouri, we have a treasurer right now. His name is Vivek Malik. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he's got cold feet over gold and silver. So we're not really pushing real hard in the state of Missouri right now for a depository. But we are pushing legislation right now because we could not get it across the finish line in 2023. And I know I'm long-winded on this, but let me say this one more time for your audience. We got right to the finish line for gold and silver legal tender legislation in 2023. It was the Speaker of the House, a man by the name of Dean Plocker, that actually prevented a vote from coming through, basically the floor leader, Jonathan Patterson. So we got all the way up to the finish line. All they had to do was vote on it. They already had it on the floor for an hour and 15 minutes or something. So they were talking about it. They were, but they just took it away, just pulled the rug out from under, the gold and silver folks. And that's a lot of folks in Missouri. This year, we're having problems again with Dean Plocker. Dean Plocker, one man who was elected, the House Speaker internally with the House, what they call the caucus, is once again slowing down the process of silver and gold by literally not assigning it to committee. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. One man holding it back for the state of Missouri. I mean, people should be aware of that, particularly since this one man wants to be our lieutenant governor, in the November elections in 2024. He apparently he really doesn't want silver and gold as legal tender, even though the Constitution of the United States, which he swore an oath to defend and protect, he doesn't want to make silver and gold money. Shame on him.
Does anyone understand why he's putting up this apparent opposition to the legislation?
Well, he's a politician, so it's likely we'll never get the truth out of him. But I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I said that jokingly. Dean. But it's probably more or less because he knows it's popular, and a lot of his political rivals are very much for the bill and want it to get through. And maybe he doesn't want them to have a win.
Okay.
It could be literally that simple. And in fact, it most likely is that simple.
What's your sense when you talk to average Missouri residents? Are they in favor of this legislation?
By far and large. The only ones that aren't are the ones that are confused and saying, well, hanging around, the store holding on to a bunch of silver and gold coins, it's kind of dangerous and everything. I keep telling them there's all kinds of ways to transact in gold and silver. And in fact, I actually went to a House hearing last week, and that was for Senator Eigel's bill. That would be SB 735, which is nearly an identical copy of Bill Hardwick's. I'm getting people confused. We have 2 bills running the same bill. So we have Bill Eigel in the Senate and Bill Hardwick in the House, and they're both running the same silver and gold bill. So that can get confusing real quick.
Yeah, a lot of bills. But thank you for explaining. It makes sense now. But yeah, too many bills.
Yep. So I testified, and unfortunately, they don't have an archive with the Senate, so people can't go back and listen to it. But the fact of the matter is, I was just explaining the different ways you can transact in gold and silver. I was actually showing them a device that, I don't have it with me right now, but you can hold it in your hand that will actually determine the purity of gold and silver coins and bars. And, so it's that simple. You set one of those up at a register along with, a tiny digital scale is all you need. And boom, you can actually determine the purity and the weight right at if someone wants to use it at, a hardware store or whatever. But the fact is, people by far and large are so removed from gold and silver for transaction because we've got many generations in between when it was normally used for transaction. That's not true with silver, but people didn't think of it that way because it was in our change. I mean, it's we've had two generations. 1964 is when Johnson took us off the silver standard. People keep forgetting about that. That's when silver was no longer put into U.S. currency change, which is actually done by the Treasury. That's not a Federal Reserve operation, by the way. And then in 1971 off the gold standard. It's important for people to truly understand those actions were technically illegal. They didn't go through Congress. They didn't amend the Constitution to take away gold and silver. They did it by executive fiat, executive order, both of them. So at any rate, but the Federal Reserve, basically fills in all the gaps, when they do that sort of thing. Their product became the only thing left we could transact in, right? They didn't own silver and gold. Silver and gold is no nation's money. It's everybody's.
Yeah.
So at any rate, and I'm sorry, it took a long, tangent off of this, but it's very, very, very important that people really, truly understand that it's just as easy to transact in gold and silver than it is with any version of the dollar that you have right now, all the way down to your ATM card. You can do that with gold and silver too.
Yep. And there's more and more very transparent, regulated, audited, functional ways to use silver and gold that are coming onto the market every single day. If somebody wants to help support the cause, Pat, what can they do? Because I know grassroots support is critical to this type of legislation.
And we're a total grassroots group. We don't have any corporate backers. We don't have donations. So basically, it's just people power, your own time, your own dime. But thank you for asking, because I want to talk about Dean Plocher for a little bit. Dean Plocher, and for those of you who are not in Missouri, you probably won't know what I'm talking about, but he's the Speaker of the House in the state of Missouri. And if Ron is so kind, we'll have a direct link down below to where you can find Dean Plocher. But I'm asking for folks to call his office and email him, asking him why he is not giving HB 1955, House Bill 1955, a home in a committee. Lots and lots of bills are getting referred to committee now. Nothing's as popular right now as HB 1955 in the House. There's more phone calls and emails coming in on that than any other bill. We already talked about why we think, he's not letting it go through. But he's scandal ridden. He's had 4 major scandals since September. And so he's politically damaged right now. And you would think he'd be a little bit nicer under those circumstances, but apparently not. But then again, it is Dean Plocher. So I'm asking for people to email him, Dean Plocher, Plocher, at house.mo.gov. And once again, this will be right down below in the description section if Ron is so kind. And his phone number is, and this is to his office, 573-751-1544. And what we're asking for very specifically is to put HB 1955 into committee. It's time to move that bill to committee. And in fact, a great committee for it would be downsizing government. Yes, we do actually have a committee for downsizing government in the House. We have one in the Senate too.
Fortuna Silver Mines is a global intermediate gold and silver producer. Since 2005, Fortuna's best-in-class management has delivered impressive growth and profits. Fortuna's solid financial position and operational expertise allows for performance in any precious metals price cycle and provides a foundation from which to harvest great profits in more favorable metals markets. Investing in Fortuna is an investment in quality, long-term, sustainable production of in-demand precious and base metals. We're asking Mr. Plocher to do is just take whatever steps he controls whatever steps
That's correct.
necessary to help just forward this legislation so that it's considered
Stop blocking it.
and
Get out of
still
the way.
put up and
Yep.
still and put up for a vote. Is that
That's
accurate?
right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it'd be going through several voting processes. Basically the first part, is pre-filing of a bill. And we know about that process. We've talked about that. So it gets pre-filed, and then when the session starts, in this case in 2024, it's January 3rd. And then bills start getting referred to committee. That is the speaker's role. The speaker has all the power, and it shouldn't be this way, but this is the way it is, has all the power to assign that bill to a committee. No one else can do it. Just the Speaker of the House. That's Dean Plocher. And then once it gets into a committee, basically you have a public hearing for a committee in which, civilians like you and me can, I say civilians, that's not the right word, but, non-politicians can actually come in and testify for or against, or do an informational testimony for a bill. And then a week after that, they typically have what's called an executive session in which the committee votes on whether or not to pass the bill out of committee. And it goes from there to a rules committee, and they vote on it there. They don't have public hearings there either. And then once it gets out of rules committee, then it goes on to a calendar. And then someone else has control finally, and that's the floor leader. The floor leader can take it from the calendar to the floor for debate and perfection and a vote. So that's the process that bills go through in the House. Slightly different in the Senate, but it's close enough. And this is what Dean Plocher is slowing down. I mean, he killed the bill last year on the second to the last day of the legislative session. He killed gold and silver, and now he's just dragging his feet on even letting it go into committee. One man is making this decision for 6 million Missourians. One man. So we should be giving him some calls and sending him some emails. And by the way, we need to be nice. Being nasty isn't going to get us anywhere. Trust me. I know how these people operate up in Jeff City. So please do help us participate in the process by getting Dean Plocher, putting him on notice that the people of Missouri we understand his game, and we simply don't accept it. Put it in committee right now, please. There's no reason not to. And it has more co-sponsors than any other bill. In other words, it's getting more attention than any other bill in the House this year so far. And of course, it just lays dormant, in the pre-filed status. It never got assigned.
Well, Pat, on behalf of myself, I'm a resident of Missouri, and the other residents of Missouri, and even people across the country, thank you for all of your work that you put in to help further this legislation. I think it's important, and I know you communicated this, but to the people that are watching, realize whether you're in Missouri or another state, grassroots movements, grassroots supports makes a big difference. So,
it does.
Reach out. I will put the link below. And if people want to learn more about Pat Holland, they can go to the Missouri mofree.org, Missouri Freedom Initiative.
That's right, mofree.org. And also, if you're in Missouri, I request that you get on the email list. Those who are on the list know how critically important it is during the legislative session. It's not as important in the off season, but during the legislative session, this is how we get out quick information very quickly to everyone in the Missouri Freedom Initiative. So if you're in Missouri and if you want to help us with silver and gold, please get on our email list. And that's right on our website, just on the right-hand side of the landing page. But please do consider getting on the email list so you can help us with gold and silver legislation in 2024 and hopefully finally get this done. But like I said, one man who has a lot of power, keeps stopping the process. And he did it last year. We can't let him do it again this year. We need to overpower him with lots and, thousands of phone calls and emails coming into his office, letting him know the people of Missouri know what he's doing. I know what you did last summer. And we do know what he did last summer because all those exposés came out on Dean Plocher. People can feel free to look that up if you want to know the scandals he's been involved in. I'm not going to talk about it on Ron's show, but 4 scandals so far, 4 scandals, and you'd think he would be humble.
And if you want to support the legal tender legislation, again, go to mofree.org, sign up for the email list. I imagine you put out some calls to action, different things
Absolutely.
people can do to help support. Pat,
Yep.
as always, on behalf of myself, our viewer, the residents of Missouri, residents all over the country, thank you for your tireless work on the legal tender legislation issue. And hopefully we can look forward to seeing you again soon here in the basement.
Ron, thank you again for having me back. God bless you, man. Take care.
Thank you.